Among the countless videos on YouTube, there are plenty that contain chilling and creepy content. But some of the most disturbing videos are those that look normal, and it's only after learning the background to the video that the audience realizes that there's far more to the dark story than was shared. Number 10. Footage of Richard Ragland enjoying himself with friends seems perfectly ordinary at first. He was a young man who cared about living life to the fullest and getting the most out of an experience as possible. With the GoPro camera, he filmed himself ziplining, taking in impressive views, and swimming beneath a waterfall. But footage of Richard's adventure wasn't posted onto his own YouTube channel. Instead, it would only make its way online after being found almost 2 years later, because the footage of Richard beneath the waterfall was recorded on the same day Richard lost his life. It was just a few days before Richard's 23rd birthday when he lost his life in June of 2017. He'd previously been in the military, but was now traveling around the United States and filming his experiences with his GoPro. On June 4th, 2017, he was with a group of friends at Foster Falls State Park in Tennessee. Richard was a strong swimmer and didn't seem to have any problems in the pool beneath the falls. He held his camera on a selfie stick, making sure to capture the scenery as he talked about the importance of living life and spending time with friends. Not long after the speech, Richard was swimming closer to the falls when he was pulled underwater. He couldn't get out himself, and by the time he was rescued, it was too late. Efforts to revive him didn't work. Richard was taken back to his family in Georgia, but the Raglands were left wondering what actually happened that day. The park rangers tried to provide some closure. Others had been filming that day, and the rangers had collected footage onto a thumb drive to send to the couple. But for reasons unknown, the drive was stolen and the footage was lost. Richard's accident remained on the minds of park rangers. When another young man came to record there years later, they mentioned Richard to him. Rich Abernathy is a diver who goes by the name Rich Aloha on YouTube. His channel records his time diving and trying to find treasures lost beneath the water. Those treasures typically take the form of jewelry that slip from people's hands as they swim, or sunglasses accidentally dropped from the shore. According to Rich, when he finds technology that can be returned to someone, he tries to make sure it gets back to the rightful owner. Rich was told about Richard's fatal accident and that there may have been a GoPro lost under the falls. As usual, Rich recorded his dive. In the video, uploaded to YouTube, he's seen collecting sunglasses and bracelets that have been left behind. When he notices something sticking out of the mud, when he pulls it out, he realizes it's a GoPro. He couldn't be certain whether this was Richard Ragland's GoPro or if someone else lost one in the water. But this camera still had a working SD card inside, and when he checked the footage, Rich knew that this was the man he'd been told about. Number 9. Elliot Eastman was a YouTuber with a channel dedicated to sharing his life in the Philippines. After posting almost 600 videos over the course of a year, his channel would suddenly be abandoned. Not long after, Elliot's name started to appear in news headlines around the world. Elliot was an American who had traveled to the Philippines in 2023. Unlike most tourists who would stay around the capital city of Manila or other tourist locations, Elliot traveled south into the so-called Red Zone. This is an area where most Western governments warn citizens to stay away from. Gang violence, kidnappings, and other crimes are frequent occurrences here, and there's little way for outside governments to help. Despite the warnings, Elliot ventured into the area where most outsiders would never see. He sought advice from a shaman and fell in love with the man's daughter. They had a whirlwind romance, and the couple soon married. Starting in 2022, Elliot began to document his life in the Philippines, living in the same community where his wife had grown up. He seemed happy with his life, setting up a beachfront shop that sold household goods and talking to fans online about the differences between life in the US and life in the Philippines. He was open about the difficulties he had, ranging from electrical problems to issues with storms. But the most serious topic Elliot covered was his own safety. He knew the risks he was taking by living in the Red Zone and talking about these openly with his fans online. His wife, Carisha, was also aware of the risks. In one live stream, Elliot suggests they go swimming, but his wife is worried about going down to the beach alone. Elliot would sometimes express his frustrations at the way his life seemed to be limited. Carisha's family had accepted him, and he was living in a shack owned by her father, but they were worried about other people who lived in the local area. Carisha's family tried to keep him safe, but this often meant limiting where Elliot could go and when. In some of his later videos, Elliot seemed to be considering moving back to the US. The final upload Elliot made to his YouTube channel was a 20-minute live stream from October 17th. He seemed more disheveled than usual, sitting on his kitchen floor and eating. He didn't react to his audience for much of the video, but did answer a question asking how he was liking life in the Philippines. He admitted there were some downsides and talked about the state of bathrooms in the country. The stream ended without Elliot's usual sign-off. Just 2 hours later, a group of 4 men arrived at Elliot's home. They were disguised as police officers and tried to force Elliot into a vehicle. He didn't believe them and attempted to escape, and during that altercation, Elliot was struck with 2 bullets, and the men eventually forced him into the vehicle. The incident was reported to the police, and an investigation soon began. A relative of one of the kidnappers went to the authorities, telling them Elliot was no longer alive. He'd been taken to a boat, but succumbed to his wounds before the men could send for a ransom. Rather than bringing the incriminating evidence ashore, the men pushed his body overboard. Since then, most of the suspects in the case have been arrested, and one confirmed the story. Unfortunately, Elliot's remains have still not been located. Number 8. Urban exploration videos are some of the most popular on YouTube. They typically consist of explorers getting into abandoned buildings and sharing what they found. Some of these buildings look as if they could still be in use, with only slight hints that nobody has walked through these hallways for years. But others are more obviously abandoned, with nature and decay making a home in a place where people used to live. Chris Hill goes by Urbex Hill on YouTube. His channel is one of the more popular of its kind and focuses on urban exploration and other creepy encounters. In March of 2021, he visited Robert Fulton Elementary School in Cleveland, Ohio. The school was originally founded in 1929 and welcomed students up until 2010 when it was closed. It didn't take long for Fulton to fall into a state of disrepair. As Urbex explored just 11 years later, the building looked as if it had been abandoned for much longer than a decade. Holes in the roof had let snow into the corridors, and the basement was almost entirely flooded with frozen water. In this first video, nothing too out of the ordinary occurs. At one point, Urbex goes into a classroom where the words "Don't explore alone" have been written on the chalkboard. But most of the creepiness of this video comes from the dilapidated state of the building. 2 years later, Urbex decided to visit Fulton again, this time at night. For the majority of the run, there is again nothing too worrying. There are some sounds of movement elsewhere in the building, but when Urbex stumbles across some bats, it's easy to assume these animals are behind the noise. But after half an hour of exploring, Urbex comes across a door completely blocked by desks and other pieces of debris. He goes into the room next door and finds it's the same classroom where 2 years earlier he'd spotted the message on the blackboard. The message remains. A door on the far wall has a makeshift sign warning people to keep out. Urbex ignores the sign and goes through the door, where he encounters a squatter who scares him into leaving the building. What makes the video even creepier is that earlier in the footage, that same figure can be seen in the background of a clip. He stands in the shadows at the end of the hall and can be seen moving away. Neither Urbex nor the audience on first watch noticed the figure. Number 7. In 2016, a strange video of a parrot started to go viral online. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a funny animal video, as the parrot squawked and repeated words. But those who knew Bud the parrot realized these were the chilling last words of his previous owner. Bud had previously been owned by Marty Durham, a 46-year-old man living in Sand Lake, Michigan, with his wife, Glenna. From the outside, the couple seemed like any other. Marty had gotten into a car accident in 1995 that left him disabled. He received disability payments, while Glenna received money as his carer. But the couple were still active. Marty would often go hunting, and the couple would frequently spend time with family and friends. They argued, especially about money, but this didn't seem to be anything that would cause serious problems between them. Marty was known to be frugal, while Glenna had a gambling habit. Marty's family members would later remark how they couldn't go anywhere without Glenna going to a casino, and she would often spend large sums of money on scratch cards. It's not clear if Marty knew the extent of her problem, but in 2015, the consequences started to become clear. That year, the couple's car was repossessed. Glenna told her husband it was a mistake, and she was going to talk to the bank about it. She was the one who paid their bills, and Marty was under the impression it was all taken care of. Not long after, Marty's mother called him with disturbing news. She'd seen a notice in the paper stating that their home was being auctioned off by the bank. Marty again asked Glenna about this, but she assured him this was all a mistake and she would handle it. On May 13th of 2015, the Durham's neighbor went to check on them. The neighbors usually talked with the Durhams every day, but they hadn't seen or heard from Marty or Glenna for a few days. The neighbor was able to access the house and found a disturbing scene in the couple's bedroom. Both Marty and Glenna had been struck by multiple bullets and both appeared to be lifeless. Emergency services were called, and remarkably, Glenna was still alive. Unfortunately, she could not provide the authorities with any information about what had happened. At first, it looked as if a third party had come into the house to attack the Durhams. There was no sign of a break-in and no obvious motive for such an attack, but there didn't seem to be another explanation. But it wasn't long before Marty's family began to suspect Glenna. They found letters addressed to Glenna's children and her ex-husband. She apologized to them and asked her ex-husband to look after the children. When the police asked Glenna about this, she said she didn't remember writing them. They also asked her about a search on her phone. She looked up the exact weapon used in the attack, which was found under a sofa near where she'd been found. Glenna again said she had no idea what they were talking about. Even though Marty's family continued to suspect his wife, the case went cold. That was until Marty's ex-wife uploaded a video online. Marty had owned an African gray parrot named Bud, which had been taken by his ex-wife after he passed away. African gray parrots are capable of mimicking human speech and will often repeat phrases they heard in stressful situations. Now, Bud the parrot was repeating an argument which seemed to relate to the disturbing crime. Bud was talking to himself in two different voices. It was clearly an argument, and Marty's family believed they recognized his voice as well as Glenna's. It ended with Marty telling his wife not to attack him. Not long after the video went viral, the police finally arrested Glenna. Bud likely witnessed the crime, but he wouldn't be able to be used in the trial. But despite this, Glenna was still found guilty of the attack and was sentenced to life in prison. Number 6. Will Norton was a YouTuber. He documented his life as a teenager in the late 2000s. His channel was typical of the time, though it rose to gain thousands of followers as he shared his experiences traveling to different parts of the country and his final years of high school in Joplin, Michigan. Will's last video was uploaded in March of 2011. Everything seemed to be normal for the 18-year-old, and there was no indication that the channel would soon be abandoned. Unfortunately, this wasn't a choice made by Will, as his life was cut short just a few months later. The incident was eerily mirrored in an early video uploaded to Will's channel. On May 12, 2009, Will uploaded a 4-minute video where he described a terrifying experience he'd had driving in stormy conditions. A storm passing over Joplin led to heavy winds and power failures. Despite the weather, Will drove to school, where he found other students sheltering in the hallway, as they feared a tornado would pass through. Thankfully, on this occasion that wouldn't happen, but the scenes of generators sparking and police officers having to direct traffic shook Will. He ended the video by expressing his wish to never drive in the weather again. 2 years and 10 days later, Will would find himself in even worse conditions. This time, he wouldn't survive. It was graduation day, and Will and his family had gone to the stadium where the ceremony would take place. There'd been some warnings about a storm earlier in the day, but meteorologists at first thought it would be nothing more serious than a heavy hailstorm. The ceremony went as planned, and Will was photographed smiling with his high school diploma. Shortly after the ceremony ended, tornado sirens began to ring. The school principal took those who remained in the stadium down into the basement, where they sheltered from the storm. But some had already begun to make their way home, including Will and his family. Will was driving with his dad in his Hummer, the same vehicle he'd been driving 2 years earlier. His mother and sister had already made it home when the tornado struck. They were on the phone with their father as Will tried to drive them back. His sister could hear the noise of the tornado getting closer, and her father was praying and telling Will to pull over. Unfortunately, there was nothing Will could do to avoid the tornado. His father tried to hold on to him, but Will was pulled from the car and taken by the storm. The 2011 Joplin tornado was one of the most devastating in U.S. history. It was classified as an EF5, reaching the highest level on the enhanced Fujita scale. Its path was about 13 miles long, and at its widest point, it was a mile wide. It pulled solid buildings from their foundations, including the city hospital, which was shifted by 4 inches, and around 160 people lost their lives, and many more were wounded. Sadly, several days later, Will's body would be found in a pond, not far from where his vehicle had landed. He hadn't survived the incident, making the title of his earlier video even more eerie. Number 5. Not long after Olga Loyek started her YouTube channel, her face started to appear in videos on Chinese social media. But these were not videos that Olga produced. Investigating these creepy videos led her down a rabbit hole of deepfakes and AI clones. After posting her first video on YouTube, Olga would only upload a handful more over the following year. She clearly put a lot of thought and time into her videos, but this wasn't something she could turn into a full-time job at that time. She was studying at the University of Pennsylvania, which would also take up a lot of her time. But to anyone using Chinese social media, it would seem like Olga had a lot more time on her hands. Scrolling through social media, it was possible to find thousands of videos by someone who looked like Olga, although she went under a different name. Around January of 2024, Olga received a strange message from a fan asking if she spoke Mandarin. The fan had come across these videos on Chinese social media sites. And not only did these videos use Olga's face under a different name, but they were also speaking a language Olga had never learned. After doing some investigating, Olga realized there were hundreds of AI clones of herself posting videos to Chinese social media and Bilibili, a Chinese social media site similar to YouTube. The most popular of these was an account named Natasha Imported Foods, but there were others under names like April and Sophia. All of the clones spoke Mandarin, and when Olga translated the audio, they all shared similar disturbing messages. Natasha claimed to be a Russian woman who'd moved to China and was now selling Russian candy. Her videos promoted the strong friendship between Russia and China and spoke about how Russia was a great but misunderstood country. April was also a Russian woman who'd come to China to study and had decided she wanted to live here permanently. The account also posted similar messages of Russian and Chinese unity. These messages were particularly disturbing to Olga, who still has family in Ukraine. The words these AI clones were saying were things she would never say herself. Oleg created a video on her own channel exposing these AI clones and what she had learned about the phenomenon. But she was not the only victim of these AI deepfakes, and other young European women also had their likenesses stolen after they had posted to YouTube. Number 4. On June 28, 2023, an experimental submersible was dropped into the ocean above the wreck of the Titanic. It was scheduled to resurface about 7 hours later, but just 90 minutes into the trip, all communication with the submersible was lost. This prompted a worldwide media frenzy as Coast Guards searched for the missing submersible. For most people, this was the first time they'd heard of OceanGate and their experimental Titan submersible. But this wasn't the first time Titan had made a trip to the famous shipwreck. As media outlets tried to share as much information as possible, one YouTuber became such a popular interviewee that he'd set up his own press conference to answer questions. A year earlier, Alan Estrada had posted a 4-part series on YouTube of his experience diving with the OceanGate company. Estrada's journey with OceanGate began around 2021. He runs a travel YouTube channel where he shares his experience visiting some of the most interesting and unique places in the world. When OceanGate began offering trips to the wreck of the Titanic, it seemed perfect for his channel. The price was a problem, though. At the time, it cost $150,000 for a trip. Estrada attracted sponsors to help pay for his trip. The expedition was supposed to take place in July of 2021, but technical problems meant the trip had to be abandoned. He was offered another journey in June of 2022 as compensation. This time, the expedition to the bottom of the ocean went as planned. Estrada's 4-part video shows the process of sailing out to the dive location and preparation aboard the ship. The final video consists of the dive itself. Before getting into the small tube-like submersible, Estrada comments on how this could be his last day alive. In later interviews, he emphasized that he felt safe the entire time, but that he and the other passengers knew the risks they were taking getting on board the vessel. During the trip, the Titan loses communication with the surface for a time, and it looks like the expedition will have to be abandoned. Luckily, communication is re-established, and the dive continues. Estrada and the rest of the crew make it back to the surface. In the video, he gives a short review describing some of the things OceanGate will have to improve if the expeditions are to continue. Safety wasn't one of the things Estrada had any problems with, but it was this that had attracted OceanGate critics for years before the dive and afterward. The Titan submersible was described as experimental, and even though Estrada claimed he and his companions knew the risks they were taking, he was positive about the safety measures that were in place during the dive. In later interviews, he described the various methods that could be used to float the submarine back to the surface and to keep everyone inside alive until rescue could arrive. Unfortunately, these measures would not be useful for the 5 individuals who took part in the 2023 dive. When the surface crew lost contact with the Titan in June of 2023, they likely expected this was another malfunction that would quickly be restored, as was the case in Estrada's trip. But this time, they realized something was wrong. The Titan had already been destroyed. It had suffered a failure caused by the intense pressure the submersible was under. The failure instantly claimed the lives of everyone on board, including OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush. Number 3. On July 17, 2020, Russian YouTuber Andrei Pish uploaded what was supposed to be the first part of a 2-part series exploring the Rybaki Peninsula. Then, Andrei's channel went silent for almost 5 years. He would return with the second part of the series in December of 2024, giving no hint of the strange and disturbing events that had happened between the 2 uploads. Andrei runs the urban exploration YouTube channel, Urban Tourism, which has over 800,000 followers. Based in St. Petersburg, Andrei has traveled around Russia and neighboring countries, finding abandoned and rundown sites to investigate with friends. While many urban explorers might limit their exploration to abandoned schools, factories, or even prisons, Andrei's channel focused on more uncommon structures. He showed his fans abandoned bunkers and industrial sites left over from the Cold War. He had a particular interest in tunnels. He had some experience doing maintenance work on tunnels in the past, which gave him knowledge about what to look out for and how to keep safe. Along with his exploration into these broken and dilapidated structures, Andrei would also provide information about the history of the location. Often, the places he was visiting were once considered highly important and would have been a hub of activity, especially if the Cold War turned hot. They now lie abandoned and in a state of disrepair. Andrei's final video in 2020 was nothing out of the ordinary. It showed him with some friends and other explorers in a more rural location, which is the northernmost point of the continental European Russia. He shows off some of the structures left behind on the surface, as well as explaining the history of the location. None of his fans could have expected he would vanish from the internet. On August 6th, less than a month after his last video was uploaded, Andrei was arrested. It would eventually emerge that he was being charged with obtaining information containing state secrets and intended to share those abroad. In particular, The authorities alleged that he had video footage of these secrets on a USB drive, which he carried with him when traveling to Ukraine. Andrei has joint Russian and Ukrainian citizenship. Unsurprisingly, what exactly these state secrets concerned was never revealed, leading to plenty of speculation. The organization Reporters Without Borders believed the charges concerned a video Andrei had made about a radar station. He'd uploaded a video exploring the station in October of 2019. While the radar station was built during the Cold War, it was supposedly still in operation. Reporters Without Borders alleged that Andrei's video had shown it was not in a good condition, as the Russian authorities had previously alleged, and it may have exposed the misappropriation of government funding. Others theorized that the illegal content may have revolved around Metro 2. This is a secret underground transportation system that supposedly operates alongside Moscow's civilian metro system. But according to his lawyer, the charges didn't concern any of his published videos. Other sources claimed Andrei had been watched by the authorities for months. He was tried in a closed trial and sentenced to 5 years in prison. And after his release, Andrei returned to his exploration. In his first video back, he mentioned that there'd been some delays between the two uploads, but he kept any details to himself. Number 2. One of the most disturbing videos on YouTube is one that was filmed long before the platform existed. It shows a Mexican singer giving a performance in front of an excited crowd. Some dancers and others wave to him. At the end of the song, the video fades to black and comes to an end. The person recording had no idea that this would be the singer's last performance. The singer in question was Chileno Sanchez. Sanchez was a corrido singer, a genre of music popular on the US-Mexican border in the 1980s and 90s. His songs were often ballads telling the stories of the criminals he'd grown up around or met during his time in prison. Despite the upbeat music, his lyrics often dealt with dark topics, but the criminal world he sang about was never far away. On January 25, 1992, Sanchez was performing at a restaurant and club in Coachella, California. Late in the performance, an intoxicated audience member climbed up on stage and brandished a weapon at Sanchez. Sanchez was also armed, and bullets were fired by both men. Both survived, but audience members were struck, including one who passed away. The audience member, Eduardo Gallegos, was arrested and imprisoned. The near miss did leave Sanchez worried about his own safety, but it wouldn't stop him from traveling to concerts. On May 16th, he traveled to Culiacan, where he performed at the Salon Buhambilias. This was where the now famous video was recorded. In the video, while the band performs the introduction to a song, Sanchez considers a piece of paper an audience member had given him. The audience member isn't captured in the film, but the video does capture Sanchez's reaction. He seems to be worried and wipes sweat from his forehead before tossing away the note and starting the song. Later that evening, Sanchez left the bar with 2 brothers, a cousin, and some women. Their car was stopped by a group of men claiming to be police officers. They told Sanchez that their boss wanted to speak with him. Sanchez agreed to go with the men, leaving behind his family. The next morning, a farmer found Sanchez's body in an irrigation canal. His eyes were covered, and he'd been struck with 2 bullets. There was evidence that his hands had been tied. The people responsible for this crime have never been found, and it's also a mystery what exactly that note in the video had said. But most people believe it was a warning or a threat of some kind, and Sanchez was the only person in the video who knew this performance may be his last. Number 1. The story of Ricard Sayajan is one of the most disturbing to have ever been documented in real time on YouTube. In November of 2015, he would upload a camera tutorial in Indonesian. It was short and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But Ricard was already suffering from an illness which would ultimately claim his life. Ricard was an artist from Indonesia who moved to the United States to better his education and pursue his artistic career. He was a talented musician and photographer, but his real passion was for painting and illustration. He liked to make Batak art, a style practiced by the Batak people of Indonesia. In his YouTube channel, he shared videos of himself creating this art, on paper and in the form of tattoos. He believed he was the first artist to transfer this art style into the form of tattoos. Ricard's channel didn't get much attention, but it remained a place for him to document his own career and life for whoever wanted to see it. He also ran another channel focused on his son, Palu, which served as a time capsule for his younger years. Over time, his videos became less frequent, but nothing seemed to be too out of the ordinary. In February of 2015, he uploaded a video of a local parade. 9 months later, he posted the camera tutorial. At some point around the time of his last video, Ricard had contracted an infection. It was causing him some pain, but he didn't have health insurance at the time. Instead of going to a doctor, he went to his boss. His boss had contracted a similar infection before and had some antibiotics he hadn't finished. He offered those to Ricard in hopes that it would cure his illness. According to Ricard, as soon as he started taking the medication, he got heart palpitations and his hands began to cramp. Unfortunately, he believed this was just a side effect of the illness and continued to take the medication. As time went on, Ricard's condition got worse and worse. He had to seek medical attention and traveled to Indonesia to do so. While there, he went to visit his mother, who would soon pass away. Ricard was now suffering from another symptom. He couldn't sleep. There didn't seem to be anything the doctors could do besides prescribe sleeping tablets, but these only allowed him to get a few painful hours of sleep per night. After months of suffering with this strange illness, Ricard posted another video to his YouTube channel explaining his situation. He was now bedbound and trapped in Indonesia. He described the pain he was in whenever he tried to sleep and the way he would jerk awake again if he was ever dropping off. He was exhausted and his body needed rest, but he couldn't get it. One theory was that he had fatal insomnia, but this was a genetic condition which Ricard hadn't seen in his family before. This seemed to have been triggered as a reaction to the antibiotics he was taking, but there had been no other record of such a reaction. As the months passed, Ricard's videos became more and more erratic. He started talking about conspiracy theories. On multiple occasions, he would begin a video without realizing he hadn't been recording and have to start over again. He would often ask viewers for help and even offered to be a guinea pig for any doctor who thought they might have an answer. No answer was ever found, and just a few days after Ricard's last video, he passed away. The exact cause of his passing remains a mystery, one which will likely never be solved. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.